So Dazon is credited as a recognized visionary and pioneer in the fight against HIV and AIDS on behalf of communities of women living with HIV and those at risk for HIV and STDs. Ms. Diallo is founder and president of Sister Love Incorporated, which is established in 1989 as the first women served as adjunct faculty in women's health and Morehouse School of Medicine's Masters of Public Health program in Atlanta. She's a founding board member of the largest national network of women of color reproductive health organizations called Sister Song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. She currently chairs the Fulton County HIV/AIDS Service Planning Council and is a member of the AIDS Research Advisory Council at the National Institutes of Health. She is pioneering in the women's HIV/AIDS and reproductive justice arena by developing, and we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, prevention intervention that is now a part of the CDC's National Compendium of Effective Behavioral Health Interventions. And she's establishing the first transitional housing program for HIV positive women and children in the South. So Dazon is who I call and refer to as my sister girl. And Sister Love is a sister organization to Iris House, and we always love when we can partner and do things together. This is not Dazon, so I'm going to just let this down. This is our speaker from last year, but coming before you, I know she's going to bring down the house. My sister girl, Dazon.
Library, and I don't have to be quiet. Thank you so much, Ingrid, for the love, and for everyone here. And I mean that, because some people have come from far. I don't know if people have come as far as I have from Atlanta by way of DC, but I am really, really thankful that this is a full house, that you all have so much energy, and if you notice when you all were coming in, I was taking pictures because you also look real good. Alverna Denise Kahn, Debbie Thomas, Ashe. Pandora Singleton, Ashe. Iris de la Cruz, Ashe. Janice Giroux, Ashe. Cynthia Moore, Ashe. Mama Folion, Annette Severe Defoe, Cicely Bolden, Gugu Dlamini, and you can call some yourself, Ashe. Call their names. Ashe. 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 We call their names, y'all, because, or at least I do, is because they are still a growing part of my new ancestry. And they continue to remind me and guide me and bind me and ground me to this work. When people ask me how am I doing, my first answer is always struggling well. Y'all feel me on that one? Because like Frederick Douglass said, without struggle there is no progress. Otto Bonton said, life is a struggle but you'll never give in. So it's always going to be a struggle, but I'm going to choose to struggle it well, because there's been enough bad struggle in this epidemic for all of us. And that's where I want to focus on how women have come to the point where we have decided to struggle well. First I want to, happy birthday to ya, happy birthday to ya, Iris House. Happy 20th, I know what it feels like. And that wasn't the one thing. I just wanted to acknowledge and bring her in the room because in a month month from now, there will be a memorial celebration for an incredible New Yorker, an amazing woman who passed just last month. And she was a founding mother of the National Black Women's Health Project New York chapter. And I'm telling you this because when I get to my story, you'll understand why the history of the project is so important and how it's ingrained and it's intertwined with all of the work that I've been doing for the last 28, 29 years in HIV and reproductive justice. Gwendolyn Braxton, Ashe. And this was, every time we came together with Gwen, you couldn't leave that room without this one. Woman time a come. Oh, yeah, y'all can clap, y'all New Yorkers, and Bostonians, and DCers. Woman time a come. Oh, yeah, you better be prepared. I'm giving you a warning. You better be prepared. A new day is dawning. Because woman time has come. 32 years into an epidemic that we have not yet claimed our own. Woman time has come. You have 8 years of a summit to claim that women put the face to AIDS in more ways than we have ever been able to define, but we can tell the story. And we're going to keep telling that story, and that's a little bit of what I would like to do today, because when we look at the intersections of all of the issues that impact women affected by HIV, living with HIV, infected with HIV, there are so many more issues, there are so many more critical spaces and places that we have to go deeper to deal with beyond that little treacherous monster called HIV. And that's why it's so important for us to understand the work that we do at the intersections and not just at the virus itself. Because I give an example, and I've heard it from other positive women all over the country that said, you know, this whole thing about viral suppression and undetectability, all of that's really good, but if I'm still miserable and depressed and beaten and downtrodden and all of that, you know, that suppression means less than the quality of life that I need to live. And so it's that point where we have to realize where that quality of life actually exists. There's a group of women in South Africa organized by a woman named Maisha Jenkins, who's actually from Oakland, former Black Panther, a long-time recovering alcoholic and drug addict, and has been going blind for the last few years. With 3 other amazing South African women, they formed a group called Feel a Sister. Feel a Sister. I like that. I like that because even their first sentence, and I've seen them perform, and you know what? See, this is why you don't let anyone set things up and then don't do it. Huh, look at that. I actually did have a story. So, Feel a Sister has a line that starts out with, these women are poets who give voice to positive Black women. And they're not talking about HIV, but they could be. They give critical voice to issues, they talk to God, they openly speak of love and sex, and for this group, they celebrate the joy of Africa. Well, for our group, we can just celebrate joy, wherever we are and wherever we're from. But I mentioned Feel a Sister because what their whole emphasis is about, same with so many different artists, is to figure out a way to tell our story that truly resonates. At Sisterhood, we have a program, a whole project. Some of you have seen the video series. If you haven't, they're on YouTube at our YouTube channel, Sisterhood, 1989. That says, everyone has a story. Is that true? I think so. Everyone has a story. And so, my emphasis is that you have a story, but you have to tell your story. You have to love your story, all of it. You have to hear her story. You have to love her story, and you have to honor all the stories. Because it is through the telling of our stories, the sharing of our stories, the hearing of the stories, that we feel the sister. And we know what it means, even if we don't know what it always feels like directly and personally. So here's a little bit of mine. So about 155 years ago, I was a freshman at Spelman College. And it was between my first and second year, and I had a work-study job on campus. And I was, and Frony probably will remember and know this, my Spelman sister, that I was a gung-ho advocate for recruitment. I still am. I helped form the Spelman Student Admissions Organization, students doing admissions work, and my job was to tour prospective families across the campus. So one hot summer day, I was touring a family across campus, and all of a sudden, now I'm an English major at that time, had just quit that biology pre-med stuff, that wasn't working for me. It was something about dissecting that pig and pre-calculus that I just didn't think I'd ever need. And I still don't, I was right. I argued with my father for 3 years and I was still right. But walking across the campus was Angela Davis and June Jordan going that way. And Sweet Honey and the Rock, the whole crew, going that way. And there was an Alice Walker, there was a Gloria Miller. There were all of these black women that I've been reading, that I've been learning from, and I wanted to know where they were going. And so I followed. I actually got sick the rest of the week because that was the seminal conference called the Black Women's Health Project National Conference. It was the very first conference ever done on Black women's health in the United States in 1983. Some people, that's just in your lifetime in this room. So it wasn't even that long ago that we first organized just around our health. So don't feel away if we're just coming in 30 years into an epidemic to talk about women at large, because even the reproductive rights community at that time, and even up to now, have been challenged with how to integrate, incorporate, and embrace HIV and AIDS as an issue of sexual reproductive health and rights. But it was at that conference that it wasn't necessarily about the issues. It was about how we did what we did. And it was important to create safe spaces to tell our stories and to give total, undivided, complete, abiding attention and love to every single story a woman had to tell. Because what we learned was that all of this information can come from outside. We can learn all we need to learn about the virus. We can learn all we need about the classes of drugs. We can learn all we need to know about the life cycle of the virus, about how to protect ourselves. We might even be able to, teach somebody how to use a condom and talk about the treatment cascade and all of these new things and tools that we have. What we don't do enough of is helping and learning with each other that we actually have the answers in ourselves from every part of our own stories. It ain't the first time you got bad news that changed your life. It's not the first time you had to figure out how to get up when you got knocked down. It's not the first time that you felt totally, utterly alone and didn't know where to go. But guess what? You're here. So that means somehow you did that. Yes, you did that. And what has to happen is that you have to remember and honor that you did that. And go back to that story and remember how you did that and learn from how you did that so that the same feeling in a different situation, you can do it again. That's why you will be struggling well. Does that make sense? Okay, y'all. All right, here we go. Now, I am the happy heathen who prays. Y'all taking a minute to mull that over and figure out what that is? Because really, you're supposed to laugh about that. I'm going to say it again. I'm the happy heathen who prays. I'm very happy with my own self and my spirit. Which means I don't get to go to church a lot. So when I'm looking for call and response, these are usually the only places I can get my congregation to say, Are you with me? Y'all feel me? You can give me an amen. I don't mind. Thank you. I just want to make sure we are all together. So, what happened in that process of playing hooky and going to that conference and learning not about all of these health issues? I was 17. I wasn't facing cancer. I wasn't a breast cancer survivor. I had not experienced sexual assault yet at that point. I hadn't gone through a lot of the stuff. What was important was sitting at the feet of watching and learning how women tapped that stuff and told that story and healed with each other, right? And that led me in all kinds of directions, but mostly I ended up working at the local Women's Health Center. I ended up working because 6 months at McDonald's was too much. So I ended up working, and I haven't been at McDonald's since '84. I've been a vegetarian ever since. Try it. So just, work at McDonald's 6 months and you'll change your life. So, ending up working at the health center gave me a whole new perspective on owning my own body, learning everything about it, and being able to teach others. And the one thing that happened that turned it all around was one day, a person named Rock Hudson, or for those of you who are under 35, think of him as, I don't know, Brad Pitt, what's the guy who's in Twilight? You know, Richard, what's his name? Just think, you know, blockbuster, #1 A-listing, highest paid actor in Hollywood at the time of the 50s and 60s, disclosed his AIDS diagnosis, July 1985. And the AIDS organization locally, that had been predominantly set up for gay men in Atlanta, had no clue what to do when all of a sudden, for some reason, women started calling like nobody's business. I don't know, maybe we all thought we were Grace Kelly or Elizabeth Taylor or something like that, I don't know. But the point is that they had no referencing for working and answering the questions of women and working with them or delivering care. And so who did they call? The folks who were doing reproductive health work in the community. Now that was an initial call, and after we came, didn't get that call anymore, because from both sides, there was this bifurcation of working on family planning, STDs, reproductive health, all that stuff over here, and oh, by the way, you people with HIV, we'll deal with that over here. And that was perplexing to me in trying to figure out how to do prevention and how to do HIV prevention, pregnancy prevention, STD prevention, violence prevention, and all of that at the same time without a base, without an evidence-based intervention, without written literature about it, without other organizations that were doing this work. But guess who was doing the work? Our sisters in the global south, in Africa, and in the Caribbean, and all over the world, because they didn't have the luxury of being all siloed like we are. And they had to address a lot of things, and here's what I learned. That there's an evolution to understanding how we define reproductive health and rights before 1994 and how we've defined it since. And it took women of color, it took poor women, it took women living with HIV, it took women who were survivors of violence to say these issues of sexual and reproductive health are our issues too. It is not just about abortion. It is not just about access to abortion or legalizing it. It is about any and everything that has to do with my ability to hold on to my own autonomy, my safety, my decision making, my own ability to act on my own behalf. And we didn't have that in HIV and AIDS. We wanted to teach people, here's condoms, here's AIDS, here's how you get it. Toss them out, go for it, be safe, deuces, right? And act like we've done the job for the day when we have not socialized women to talk about sex because we haven't been in that place before. When we have not socialized women to all of a sudden stand up and say, you know what, this is how I like it and this is how you're going to do it, you're not getting in it. We didn't have those tips either. We didn't have spaces where it was okay to talk about what we liked and how we liked it and how we were going to do it differently so we could stay safe. And where I found those conversations were not in the HIV community, but in the community where folks were focused on liberating women in terms of their own sexual and reproductive freedom. So I want to talk just a little bit about what that looks like. because a part of my conversation today was locating HIV in the human rights framework. And why the human rights framework? Because every single category within that framework impacts the world of HIV. And when we talk about reproductive justice, which I'll explain a little bit more in a moment, everything within the reproductive justice framework fits within the human rights framework and is all related to HIV as well. And did I get a clap there? Excellent. And that's because human rights are actually universal. I threw this one in because I think it gives you a good example of where I'm trying to go on this issue of human rights, and then we'll get to the RJ part. What I mean by locating HIV in the human rights framework is this. There are, work with me now because it's real simple, you don't have to write all of this down. There are 8 categories, officially considered 8 categories in terms of the human rights framework. They are, they're not up there on that slide. The civil rights, we know what those are, right? What are civil rights? Give it to me. Somebody. It's a test. What? I'm hard to hear. Somebody relay that like the people's movement. Like Occupy.
I hear women, child.
Women. Civil rights, I'm going to keep it simple for you. It's simply the right to be treated equally under the law. Right? But what if the law says, you all can't eat in this restaurant? Or what if the law says, housing is not a human right? Then y'all just all want the right to be treated equally bad under the law. So you've got to have some other stuff. You've got to have some political rights. You've got to be able to have a voice, to organize. You've got to have an ability to vote. You've got to have economic rights. That means that your community, your country should be organized in a way that everyone can get the work that they need and support their families in the way they need to do. That includes the ability to organize, to unionize. That includes the ability to demand fair wages. That includes a living wage. Your social rights, which are your rights to have access to health, housing, education, all of these things. Then there are your cultural rights, developmental, environmental, and sexual. I want to hold there on sexual rights because I think that that's where almost everything, not everything, but almost everything about HIV fits within the RJ, reproductive justice and human rights paradigm. And what I mean by that is, and there's a whole list of them, but you have the right to be protected sexually. You have the right to sexual expression. You have the right to marry whom you choose, when you choose, how you choose. You have the right to actually be sexual. Now, I could go on with a whole list, and I bet you can think of 11, that's the number where I come from. You can think of 11 women living with HIV for whom every single one of those things has been a challenge, has not received the protections or the due process of protections that we deserve. So when you take that and you fit that into a larger frame around reproductive justice, which in simple terms says, women and people, and I'm breaking it down real elementary, but there's a whole lot in it, have the right to have the children they want to have, not have the children they don't want to have, and the right to parent the ones they do have. Are we together? So you can fit almost anything into that. The right to be or not be pregnant. And that doesn't mean that everything about reproductive justice has to center around your womb. It has to center around your entire life that creates the environment that you can make those choices in. I might want to have a family, but I don't have the right wages. I don't have the right family support. I'm in the neighborhood that I don't think my child would survive. I don't have a school that I could get my kid to right away. I don't have a healthcare provider that's going to work with me to have the child that I want to have the way I want. So those are all challenges to reproductive justice. And if I don't want to have a child, shoot, we're arguing right now whether my contraception should be covered. We're arguing, even especially in some places, for women living with HIV around whether they should have opportunities for infertility treatment, whether they can be pregnant and have children when they choose to. In some instances, women are still coerced to discontinue or to terminate their pregnancies, to get tubal ligations, to be sterilized, for no scientific reasons, but because someone else has the audacity to choose or decide to choose for us what's best based on their own perceptions of our ability to take care of ourselves. Are we together? And then there's that whole issue about parenting the children we have. I can't tell you how many visits we had to make with the Department of Family and Children Services, and then it just started to be complaints up the line because visiting with the workers wasn't helping with the caseworkers, where we would have women who would be told, well, you know, you have AIDS, not HIV, and your parental rights were suspended because of other issues. It might have been had to go into treatment, might have had to spend some time, might have had a hospital visit, a stay that was too long, and they had to go, the children had to go into ward or into care. But for someone to sit and say, now your parental rights are now discontinued because you're not going to be around anyway. They should be with families that are going to be able to watch them grow up. I had a grandfather who was hit by a car when I was 10 years old. So I couldn't watch him grow up. But nobody told him that, you know, he wasn't going to be a good parent for the time he was here. So the whole idea of focusing on HIV, and this is a public health standpoint, the whole idea of focusing on HIV, strictly from a public health standpoint, getting people tested, counting the numbers of folks who are positive, getting them into care, linking folks, retaining folks, y'all know the whole spiel now with the cascade, right? Or teaching folks about prevention and hoping that we get to some metric that starts to reduce the epidemic takes a whole lot more. And this is just an example of some of those issues. When we think of every single person or group who are most affected by HIV around the world, actually tell me who some of those people are. Name them. Not by name, but the groups. Women, transgender, keep coming, seniors, adolescents, LGBT, homeless, incarcerated, undocumented, inmates. We got more? Addicts. Who? Yes. The disabled. You can go down the list of people who are most affected no matter where you go in the world. Oh, and ethnic and racial minorities.
Thank you.
Left those out. Are most impacted by HIV. What is the common thread for all of those people we just named? They are the folks whose human rights are least protected. Y'all feel me? So if I had better access to health care, if I had coverage of health care, if I had health literacy, if I had health information, if I had good education, good schools, if I had good jobs and opportunities to develop myself and my family. And we know this. There are studies that are looking at cash transfer incentives for young girls to stay in school. The end point isn't stay HIV negative. The end point is get an education. Because they know that when the girls get that education, they're less likely to get into those intergenerational relationships. They're less likely to transact sex for a ride, for a school book, for a uniform, for a meal, for her locks, her weaves, and her nails. Y'all feel me? Yeah. Or just for money. And they give it to the family so that she will not be ostracized or overrun or abused because the income is coming to her. That's another example. Does that sound like reproductive health? No. Typically it doesn't, but it absolutely is reproductive justice. Because reproductive justice is the triangulation of addressing the oppression, making sure that there's services to deliver, that's the healthcare part, and making sure that their rights are protected. That's reproductive justice. Are we together? Yes. Addressing the oppression, making sure that there are services to help address those oppressions, and making sure that those rights are protected so that those other two things we can address on a continuous basis. Are we together with that? For real. I want you all to be able to talk about HIV from a reproductive justice standpoint from here on out. Because we have a roadmap that doesn't necessarily have all those endpoints. And we want to make sure that those endpoints are there and that they are met. In our national HIV/AIDS strategy, we want to know how much more integration our government is going to be able to do, especially in the upcoming policy changes we've got going on with the Affordable Care Act. What's going to happen in terms of women's access to care? What's on paper looks really, really good. What happens down south in the Beltway, you know, that DC area, is a little frightening. Okay, no, it's a lot of frightening. But my point in that is that we have a tool that needs work, and we're the ones who have to do that work, but we've got to be able to articulate that in a way that makes sense in terms of the metrics. And what I mean by that is that we need to be able to say, for example, this is just an example, we're not going to get into this whole conversation. PrEP, who knows what PrEP is? All right, my 30-second spiel on PrEP is only about 15 people raise their hands, unless others' hands are full with their desserts or their plates. Pre-exposure prophylaxis, new science all the time. And this new science basically says that we now know for people, inside these studies at least, for people who are at high risk, very high risk, meaning continually possibly exposing to HIV, that they can take a medicine that would, and daily, that would help them largely prevent HIV. Well, guess what, y'all? We've approved it in the United States for all adults, men and women. Did y'all know that? Yeah. So it's been approved, but we have two studies, specifically done on women as women, not in couples, not in situations where everybody knows everybody's status, just generally walking around everyday women. People want human rights, we want reproductive justice, we want to make sure that every person living with HIV or at risk for HIV has all of the protections, rights, healthcare delivery, and the addressing of the root causes of the oppressions to address HIV in its totality for all of us. For all of us. So, yeah. So, when we talk about everyone has a story, I'll tell you this one. Recently, we have support groups. Oh, and here's the thing, our support groups are micro-enterprise engaging, people are making things, people are selling things, people are doing services, all while they're getting their own stories told and heard and met. And we had recently a young woman who is perinatally infected, 27 years old, in a relationship that's stable with a man who is HIV negative, and had decided from the time she was a child that she was never, ever, ever, ever going to get pregnant. Things have changed. The epidemic is about everybody, but we know who it's about the most no matter where you go in the world. And we have to own it. Women are more than half the epidemic. We have to own it. Once women own this thing, grab it, embrace it, and kick its ass, then that same door that was kicked open by our comrades in the early 80s, that door will be kicked closed by women around the world. And that is the message that we have to continue to bring to each other. We, women, in all our partnerships, we will end this thing. Because as the mothers, as the grandmothers, as the aunties, as the nieces, as the cousins, as the play aunties, some of y'all got play aunties. It will be once we say so